Been made possible in part by the following sponsors. The Trial Lawyers Association of BC. The Vancouver Courier newspaper. KCM Wealth Management.
By the way, I just learned today that 1% of all the land titles in the world are held by women. In other words, all of the properties that are legally assigned to somebody as ownership, 1% belong to female persons. This has nothing to do with our topic today, but this has really struck me today that we like to think that women's equality and women's opportunities and so on have come a long way. Oops, looks like we have a little further to go. Well, a somewhat related topic. Dene Rossouw is many things. Among others, he teaches leadership and public speaking and so on. And he's been a minister. He's had a very interesting career, originally coming from South Africa. But he had quite an experience a few years ago when one of his 4 children, a son, came out of the closet and declared that he was gay. And Dene struggled to deal with that. So he wrote a book, and you will see that book pop up. But there it is, A Complicated Love. And Dene is here in the studio. Yeah, quite a story. Tell us the exact, where were you? Were you standing, sitting? Were you outdoors, indoors? What were you doing at the exact moment that you first heard that your son was gay?
David, I was in Nova Scotia because we'd emigrated.
Yes.
So we got the call. It was, I think it was a spring day. And I was inside the house, got the call, and my wife said, "Jared's got something to tell you." And I think instinctively she knew what he was going to talk about. But I was in Nova Scotia, just doing. Yes. I think it was a weekend, just doing what you normally do on a weekend.
Yes.
So that's where I was when the call came through.
And what was the call?
Well, the call was, his words were, "Dad, I need to tell you, I've come out. I'm gay." Yeah. And that was at the time of his 21st birthday. Ah. And I think what happened is on his 21st, because I wasn't there,
yes,
he'd decided to tell all his buddies.
Okay.
And so then the next thing was to tell his dad.
Yeah.
And so that's the call. So
and his birth mother, his birth mother already knew?
She knew, but we'd never really spoken about it. I think she knew, as women are very intuitive.
And you had been apart from her for several years.
Oh, yeah, many years.
Many years, yes. At that point. Women are better at these things, aren't they? They seem to know these things better than us goofy men. Yeah. So did you fall over? Did you drop the phone? Did you pour yourself a scotch? I mean, what happened?
Yeah, all of those, all of the above, Yes. Yeah, so I think there is, given my background, there was an initial shock, I think.
Really?
I think, yes, there was. It was because of my baggage, the stuff that I was going through. And you can't deny that. There was definitely a shock. Yet at the same time, I was very calm and collected to him on the phone. Mm-hmm. I remember that, saying, this is fine, let's talk about it. But internally, I think there were a couple of things going on. One was, what did I do wrong? And, obviously I had to work through that. That's the book. But in some ways, how come we never spoke about it? And there was probably something cooking inside where I started to realize a sadness. That, he has a son, he's 21 years old, he's 21 years of his life. And there's a big piece of it that I probably didn't want to know about, was in a sort of a denial. And yes, so there's a sadness because there's something missing.
After he dropped this little bombshell on you, did you find yourself, Dene, sort of pacing around the house and trying to remember little moments where you might have picked this up?
Good question. There were there were times, I remember one thing, because we spoke about it, because as you know, we went on this road trip, but there was a time when, with the kids going through school plays, and mom and dad gets invited. Yeah. And there was one school play in particular, because he was a very good actor, and there was one school play where he was playing a particularly feminine role, and it pushed my buttons. And I remember watching the play, and then afterwards taking him home in the car and trying to tell him that he shouldn't do that. And
Really?
Now, of course,
you told him that.
I regret those conversations, of course. But I realized it wasn't about him. It was all about me. There was stuff in there that I couldn't deal with, because it was seeing him like that was surfacing maybe unfinished conversations I never had with myself.
I'm laughing because you reminded me of when my son played in Fiddler on the Roof in high school. He played one of the Russian soldiers. I didn't know what part he was playing. I just went to see it.
Right.
And he is, by the way, a professional actor. He wasn't at the moment. Yeah, he was at the moment. But anyway, I went to see it. He plays one of the Russian soldiers. And of course, I went, "You're in a Jewish play? You couldn't play a Jew?" Right away. I was indignant. How come you played a Russian?
Yeah, so it's the same thing. It's me downloading my stuff.
But what about other moments? Did you find yourself just noticing him walking through the kitchen over breakfast, or the friends he was with, or other choices he had made that you really hadn't noticed before?
I think any parent will notice stuff, but given where I was from, I was probably not wanting to notice it. But there were times.
Okay, let's talk about that. Where were you from? Where were you from?
Yeah. So I'm from Cape Town originally, Cape Town, South Africa, and if I roll back into previous life, I'm a qualified minister. I'm no longer religious. Right. I'm not in the religious space, but I did a theological degree, and was 17 years in the ministry. So,
wow!
So given that background, there was a fair amount of that background and cultural baggage and some religious baggage that really prevented me from really being honest with myself and having conversations with him. So when we saw those early signs, one of the early signs you asked about was sleepover parties.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Lots of girlfriends.
Yes.
But no real girlfriend. And lots of guy friends.
Yes.
Okay, lots of guys. Everyone sleeping and partying in the bedroom, chaos and so on as a young person. But no real, my other sons all had, girlfriends.
And so, are you trying to tell me that parents actually believe that sleepover parties are supposed to be asexual?
That's right.
Sleepover parties are all about fooling around, aren't they?
Yeah, I suppose so. But in some ways, I realized there was nothing really cooking, in terms of those relationships. So maybe I should have, but I think I was in denial, David.
Never forget that Hugh Hefner lived in his pajamas. For him, it was one big sleepover party.
That's right.
Yeah. When you say you were in the ministry, there are lots of ministries today, but you're talking about 20 or so years ago. There are lots of ministries today that accept gays and lesbians and transgendered and all kinds of many genders of people open-heartedly, and embrace people of all kinds. But I suppose when you were in the ministry, that wasn't the case.
Well, it wasn't the case then, but it's also not the case today with lots of religious groups.
Yes, of course, yes.
As we know, and that's the sad thing. Yeah. And I think, if I think of all the years, we as a fraternal of ministers from different churches, often we'd meet with Catholics, Lutherans, the whole gambit. Yes. And that subject never came up. It was almost pushed away. Yes. And so it was one of the unspeakables.
And we've had a major upheaval, a cataclysm of a kind here locally with the Anglican Church.
Yes.
With people breaking off and people, I'm not with them anymore. And,
right.
That's the church I go to. That's the church I would never walk within 100 yards of, and so on.
And that's so sad.
It's terribly sad.
It's so sad,
We'll come back to Jared, his gay son, in a moment. But there are 3 other children.
Right.
After this experience of going on this trip with Jared and this road trip and talking endlessly for hours and so on, and crying and laughing and fighting and all the things that are transcribed in your book, what did you find yourself thinking about the other kids? Are you starting to peel back and discover other things about the other children that you hadn't really noticed?
Thinking about that. Well, the subject of Jared being gay,
Yes.
they as brothers knew.
Uh-huh.
In subsequent, conversations, because I speak
Yeah.
with all of them. I speak with them every week, right?
Yeah.
On Skype.
Great.
And we have a great relationship, all four of us. And they knew. Dad was the guy that didn't know or didn't want to know. They knew. They were very close. And so there are things that it's interesting that every child, I'm discovering, wants to know where they come from and their sense of history and place in the world.
Of course, everybody does.
And so, as I talk about in the book, there was a period, maybe because of my lack of engagement with Jared, he says he can't remember there's no memories that he has of just me and him. But now, as we are talking, and as I'm talking, as your question with my other sons,
Yes.
they recalling those hikes and those times around the campfire and those things. In actual fact, all four of them just been back to South Africa to retrace some of those experiences we had.
Yes.
But I think in the moment when there's a certain amount of stress, a lot of those things just evaporate. You can't remember some of those good times. And I think that was the tension between the two of us, that Jared said he couldn't remember some of those good times.
Do you think, I have no idea if this is the case, and I'm not trying to play psychologist with you, I have no idea, I'm just asking. Do you think you were one of these people, because I've seen this happen with others, a minister who is ministering so much to his flock that he doesn't notice the people closest to him?
I was that. I was one of them, for
Were
sure.
you truly?
Without a shadow of a doubt.
Yes.
My house was like a bus shelter.
Ah, yes.
People were in and out. You got people wanting to commit suicide. Someone just.
Yes.
I used to work with motorcyclists.
Yes, yes, yeah.
People, and so in motorcycle clubs, and so time is different.
Yeah, a lot of stuff going on, a lot of drama.
A lot of drama.
Melodrama.
And so of course those closest to you, and in particular Jared.
Yes.
There was probably times he needed me to be there, just to not to explain or just to be there, and I wasn't there. So there is the absent syndrome, and I had to work through that. Did that contribute?
You were physically there, but your mind was on something else.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
On that note, let's just pause and catch our breath. All right. Our guest is Dene Rossouw. The book, A Complicated Love. A straight father, a gay son, and lessons from a road trip. Very, very good read. I encourage you to pick it up. So we're going to take a little break. Remember, davidberner.com is the site to go to. We welcome your feedback, and we can take this opportunity to let our friends who are so kind in supporting the program to show their faces here on Shaw Community Television Cable 4. Back in just a minute.
This program has been made possible in part by the following sponsors: the Trial Lawyers Association of BC, the Vancouver Courier newspaper, KCM Wealth Management,
Life seems to have changed so much in recent years. You would think that anybody very few people would struggle with the idea that they are gay or their children are gay or something. That's not true. It's still a kind of major new piece of information to deal with. And that was certainly the case with our guest, Dene Rossouw, whose book, A Complicated Love, spells it all out when your son, Jared, came out of the closet. And then the two of you went on this somewhat agonizing road trip. Now, I got to be honest with you, I had some problems with this. And I'm wondering, did you think beforehand when you wrote the book about what you wanted the reader to think of you? Did you have any concern about that? Did you want to be seen as a guy who struggled with some issues? Did you want to be seen as a guy who was accepting? Did you want to be seen as a guy who was brutally honest?
I had no concept about me, what they thought of me. That wasn't the purpose. The purpose
Okay.
was, a little bit of background is that when we went on this road trip,
Yes.
For some reason, I put a tape recorder on the dash.
Yes.
And I recorded our conversations over the 5 or 6 days.
And Jared knew that tape recorder was there.
Yes.
He was okay with that.
But there was no clear idea at that stage that this was going to become a book. I just thought what we're going to talk about is going to be quite profound. And so then in listening to those, a couple of months later, I realized there's some really interesting stuff we're talking about.
Yes.
So that's why, impression of me, I decided to actually put it on as we spoke.
Yes.
Rather than censoring all this and worrying about my image, my professional image, and so on.
Well, I think the punchline, the result, is most salutary, is wonderful and cheerful, and it sounds and looks like you and your son have a wonderful relationship and you've come to understand each other and so on. But I found the process almost agonizing, to be honest with you. And I'll tell you why. There were two things that constantly were driving me crazy. I almost threw the book at the wall. One of them was that it seemed to me that you were stuck on the notion of causality. In other words, A results in B. And you seemed to be so caught up with it, this was your fault, that because I was not a great father, you're gay. And every time I read that, and you seem to say it about 90 times, I just want to smack you and say, the kid's gay because he's gay. Shut up. What's it got to do with you?
So it's interesting you say that. In the journey,
Yes.
we realize that now. We get it.
Yes.
Now we're on the same page. But for a lot of people, I thought I'd leave that in, that painful part, because a lot of the people I know who are steeped in religion, when I say religion in the wrong sense, in the sense that there's no accepting of gay people.
They have certain dogmas. Yeah.
So I thought I'd keep those conversations because at that stage I was overwhelmed by all kinds of things, including guilt and stuff. So I had to actually work it through. So I decided to keep those conversations in the book. Now we get it. We're part of the solution. Now I understand. I've done a lot of research.
When you look back at what you wrote, do you feel that you were like constantly, in a sense, barking up a wrong tree, always going on about what did I do, as if what did it have to do with you?
Yeah. Now in hindsight, you realize that that had nothing to do with it.
Exactly.
But I think part of that is to, whatever the result is, we need to have the conversations.
Absolutely.
We need to be able to say what's cooking, what's on our mind, and work it through.
Yeah.
If I knew what I knew now, I probably would have shortened the conversation in some ways, but I had to work it through. It was a lot of my stuff and really getting to understand him. When you get to that point, and then I went away and then worked through stuff, because I really had to admit that a large part of my religious life, I was up barking up the wrong tree, by condemning people.
Well, and the other theme that you came back to, I would say at least 5 times, and each time you did, I found myself getting almost furious, was almost sort of suggesting, is it possible, Jared, you could be a little bisexual? And you kept asking, well, if a beautiful woman took off her clothes in front of you, wouldn't you get aroused? Wouldn't you get excited? And so on. And it was like you were hoping that maybe there was an ounce of heterosexuality in him. And I kept wanting to scream at you, would you stop that?
Yeah, that's my faint hope clause.
Your faint hope clause, exactly.
Working it through, thinking, and then once we'd already had those conversations, realizing,
yes,
okay, it's not about me. It's much more complex. And that's, in terms of someone being gay, we can't just simplify. It's not just black or white. When you're in this religious background, things are going to be black or white. Things are sinful or not sinful. And as you mature, you realize there's lots of gray.
Are you in the middle of a second book called Leaving the Church or something like that?
Maybe I should. I've left the church a long time ago.
No, I know, but even here, just spending a few minutes talking, this theme has come up several times. Clearly, this has had a huge, huge place in your life, both being in the church and then saying, no, this isn't for me. Clearly, this is a major transformation for you.
Yeah, I think I could really identify with people that struggle with that same thing.
Yes.
Where you would take, for example, Holy Scriptures or something like that, or your holy book, and say, here it says, gay people, are such and such.
Yeah.
And I could really help them have those conversations, because part of that is letting go of that religious security you have in a book and realizing that a lot of those things that people rely on are pre-scientific. You can't actually extrapolate them into today.
Have you been invited in recent years, or have you made yourself invited in recent years to religious circles, to churches, to have these kinds of dialogues?
I've spoken in some churches, but there's some.
Because I know you're a public speaker.
Yes, yes. There are some that don't want to touch the subject. You'd think, as we both get it, a lot of them don't want to go there because they know they'll split the congregation in half.
Oh, really?
But I still think I need to be invited, and those conversations need to be had.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what else do you think? What other doors did this conversation with your gay son, do you think, open, both between you and Jared and between you and the other children? It seems to me it must have sort of been a wedge in opening a lot of communication.
I at the moment in time, I have fantastic conversations with all my sons. Yeah. And so I think they saw Dad took the time to actually work it through. He's written a book. Yeah. And so we speak every week. They're all over, in other parts of the world.
Where is he these days? Still London?
Jared was in Cambridge, England, and he's just moved back to Cape Town.
Okay. Oh, really?
Yeah, he's moved back. So our conversations...
That's very interesting, because you have felt, and you said clearly in the book, Cape Town is a very frightening, threatening place. It's violent, and people live in closed enclaves. And
well, that was 12 years ago when we left, 13 years ago.
Has it become
Cape Town is in a sense, is a bit of an enclave. It's very artistic. It's very much like Vancouver. So being younger, they don't see it with the same eyes as we would see it. Okay. They don't have kids yet, so maybe, that would change. But it has definitely, it is a place where there's more hope, I would say, in Cape Town. And so they move back. But to answer your question is, the conversations I have with them are really good. They're deep. We talk about all kinds of stuff. And I think maybe having the conversation with Jared set the tone for that. We don't talk about the weather. We talk about real things, and I find that, my son's oldest one is 36. Yes. As we're moving down. We talk about real things, and I find that enriching. Yeah.
Are you going to be one of the millions of people who will be just absolutely in tears when we lose Mandela?
He is an icon of and a real person of great stature and security, and I think
he's one of the great figures of the modern era.
Yes, and here's the word I want to bring up. He's an icon of acceptance, and that's very much so with gay, straight. Yeah. When people talk about tolerance, it means not in my backyard. I will tolerate you, the sort of arm's length thing, and that's also to do with sort of homosexuality. And the shift, which Mandela really introduced, was acceptance. Shifting away from tolerance, because with tolerance you don't have any real dialogue. With acceptance you learn. And you need to engage. You've got to lean into those conversations.
When he came to power, I think there were so many millions, thousands of black people who assumed this will now be the black era. And he was adamant, no, this is the black and white era. This is the total. This is the completely accepting. The little movie about the Springbok soccer team that was such a good movie.
The diversity, the rainbows.
It's just stunning. What a big soul and mind he has been.
And as you say, if he passes on, a lot of people are wondering. There's no statesman at the moment in Africa and other those areas too. There's Desmond Tutu, who is a real anchor to a lot of people. But when Mandela goes, there's no one to replace people to present that level of acceptance, of let's work together, that sort of rainbow nation.
Let's go back. Suppose we just have a couple of minutes left. A friend comes to you, knocks on the door, picks up the phone.
Right.
Dean, I know you've been through this experience. My daughter just told me that she's a lesbian. What do I do? What would you say?
Talk. Have the conversations. I avoided those conversations for years until I got the call. I would say use that to learn. Because as we have the conversations, we learn, we grow. Keep an open mind, but engage. Lean in rather than lean away from that. So if someone comes and asks me that, a lot of people who read the book says, this book has helped me just in my normal family communication, not just gay, straight.
Yes.
So that, I think, is the message, is that I would recommend that person, or would really urge that person, is to be present, to be around, and to be available, and to just have conversations, and without any big agenda.
Exactly, without an agenda.
Without an agenda. It's more what I would call generative dialogue. It's creating something new through talking, where there is some sort of action afterwards, but we haven't predetermined it.
And you don't have to.
No.
In fact, it's limiting and destructive to worry about what the action is.
That's right. Yeah.
It's just do it.
Yes.
Just get involved.
Just do it.
Just be engaged.
Be in the space. Be in the moment, and see what happens.
Yes.
And I think that's the message, the enriching message that people need to do and experience.
Yes.
It's enlivening when you do that. So I would encourage people to do that. And also religious people.
Have you in any way, about 30 seconds, have you in any way been embraced by the local gay and lesbian community?
Oh, yes. I've got lots of gay friends.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good. Yeah. Lovely. Dene, super. Thanks.
Thank you.
A Complicated Love is the name of the book. That's it for us for today, folks. Next week, we continue with our political agenda, and our guest will be David Eby, well-known local lawyer, as with the BC Civil Liberties Association for years. And he has the charming task of running in West Point Grey up against a certain gal. She has some position. Oh, I know who it is. It's the Premier, Christy Clark. So that'll be a fun conversation. Join us for that. In the meantime, thanks for being with us here on Shaw Community Television, Cable 4. Good night.